Here we are about 6 kilometers east of downtown Kingston, across the Cataraqui River at the Ravensview wastewater treatment facility, sewage plant. So all of Kingston's sewage now goes into a network. This is downtown Kingston. Goes into a network of pipes, flows through to the shores of the Cataraqui River, gets pumped under the river, underground to here, to this plant on the shores of Lake Ontario, downstream of Kingston, to be purified and released back into Lake Ontario. This Ravensview wastewater treatment plant was replaced a little over a decade ago, and it is a fairly state-of-the-art facility. This little building behind me here, if you haven't seen one, it's an outhouse, and it's a good place to start talking about groundwater, because underneath my feet the soil is moist. At some point there's fractured rock underneath that. There's a water table which fills the fractures with water, which my neighbor up the road there is pumping with as well. And the basic idea of the outhouse is that if you go in there and do your business 1 or 2, it just drops through the hole onto the soil below and gradually seeps through the unsaturated soil where there's bacteria. The bacteria work on that material and turning it into benign neutral waste products, which then seep down into the water table, hopefully in a harmless fashion. If this becomes too large, or if it's an industrial septic tank, or if it's a sewage plant that's leaking, there's too much material and the bacteria can't keep up, or if there's not enough space between the surface, the aerated zone, and the groundwater table, so that process, that period of time required to break down those waste products so they become harmless is not enough. So there has to be enough time for that material to seep down through the aerated zone for that bacteria to do its job. If it hits the groundwater too soon, it's still toxic, gets into the groundwater, and then my neighbor just up the road gets very sad. Groundwater. So just up the road, my neighbor has a more sophisticated system. He has a flush toilet, he has a well, and what's called a septic tank. A septic tank and a weeping tile. So the septic tank holds all of the solid waste, and then that flows out in porous rocks and tubes, which then control the infiltration into the soil and into the rock. And the notion of managing human waste, at least in this beautiful cottage country, and doing it right is an example of doing our own little bit of earth systems engineering to prevent our byproducts from contaminating this environment. So let's come back to Kingston now and have a look at, in particular, the Kingston waterfront. Obviously, it's lakeside, but all of this area behind me also has groundwater and groundwater contamination due to the very industrial past of Kingston. The left-hand photo is a collection of photos taken in the late 50s. The photo on the right was taken in 2011. So let's look a little deeper. So this image is downtown Kingston in the late 1950s. City Hall is where it is today. The trains came down rail lines from the north, entering the city from the east. And here you can see lots of trains being loaded, unloaded. The black piles right here are piles of coal. You can see lots of chemical and oil tanks sitting on the ground. All of those would have been leaking over many decades. And this area would have a lot of non-soluble contaminants, and these would be sitting in the ground today. Here's what that looks like today. You can see the K-Rock Center, our entertainment center, a lovely residential development here. This is our health building, and then this road here is the causeway crossing of the Cataraqui River. This is the causeway and bridge across the mouth of the Cataraqui River, which is the beginning, the south end of the Rideau Canal system. And on the shores of this river, just behind me here, where we have some townhouses, there's the Kingston Entertainment Center. This was all a large storage yard, loading center for trains. The tracks went up from here to meet the main line. Oil storage and all sorts of other industrial uses down at this waterfront. It's a very pleasant place to live now, but you can imagine the hustle and bustle of train cars offloading. Here's the Ministry of Health as well on that same site. To the west of our downtown is a large complex that was a railway factory. You can see the foundries in the middle of this picture, and lots of other shipyards. And again, over here, more coal storage. This would have been heavy, heavy industry with heavy metals, coal tar again, and lots of contaminants sitting in this ground mass. We're here at Battery Park, which is now a site of a luxury hotel, some luxury condominiums, apartment, and it's just west of the city of Kingston. It's hard to imagine now, but this was the site of an enormous first steam locomotive, then diesel electric locomotive factory for train engines. So heavy foundry, lots of heavy machinery, metallic contaminants, coal tar, and PCBs, and all number of contaminants that had resided in what was reclaimed land here for a very long time, and before this development was proposed and constructed. And of course that posed a lot of environmental reclamation challenges. To the north of Kingston, this is Bell Park. This is Bell Island out here in the water, in the river, and then in between, in 1957, is a marshland, and you can see just the beginnings of what will become the Bell Park dump. If you go to the 70s, you can see this dump in full swing. All of this garbage is being basically just dumped and covered, and you can see a toxic waste dredging site. That's the waste from dredging for the river. And here we are in 2011 with what is now a golf course on that site. To the south of the site, just here, is the Davis Tannery, a place where leather was manufactured in the last century. It's now been demolished, but then the site remains as a contaminated site with significant groundwater issues. This is the main mound behind me of what was the Bell Park dump. This is nothing like a modern landfill. This would have just been garbage spread out into a marshy area on the river, gradually filled up, and then just covered over. No engineering, just garbage, dump. And so this has led to all sorts of contaminants in the groundwater and the soil, into the river as well. But this is the legacy of deciding in early Kingston history that a good place to put all of Kingston's garbage would have been in the middle of the river. This has now been covered over. This is actually a driving range, and there's a golf course, but here we are. Nothing like a modern landfill with clay liners, leachate collection systems, caps, methane collection, everything. This is a dump. These are poplar trees which have been planted by the city recently to assist, and there's more on the other side of the dump there on the north shore, to assist because poplar roots can fix some of that contamination and render it inert in the ground. Also inside this forest and in beyond on the shores are monitoring wells to assist in keeping track of any possible migration out of this site now. But this is new remediation and monitoring efforts. None of this was in place in the 60s and 70s when this dump was in operation. And now we're at the north side of that Bell Park site. We can see some swans here getting stuck in the ice, but just beyond them, this little bit of land with the short trees, this is a dump site for dredging waste from the river, which is also contaminated. So due to the industrial past of this Cataraqui River system, the actual immediate sediment under the water is also contaminated. So when they dredge that up, they have to store it somewhere, and this was a site where they did that some decades ago. Now you would have to haul it away and dispose of it properly. If we just go to the north, you can see some major construction happening. This construction is for what we call the third crossing bridge site. It'll provide a third bridge across the Cataraqui River to ease some traffic flow in the downtown. And as you can see, the first step in building this bridge is to build a land causeway in order to allow the foundations to be constructed. And one of the most important environmental aspects of this job is to control the disturbance of the subsurface just underneath the river and to prevent any further contamination of this ecosystem. So just behind this fence and this sign is the Davis Tannery, which it was a massive leather tannery in the last century. and was closed down many decades ago. This is now a forested site, but the legacy of that very chemically intense industry lives on. The groundwater behind this site and the land itself is highly contaminated, and that's why nobody's built here yet, because of the cost of remediation. There's been many proposals, and someday maybe it'll get cleaned up. So here's the shoreline of that Davis Tannery site, and contaminants that are in the groundwater below that site gradually migrate out and do make their way into the river and into the sediments. And contaminants like chromium and mercury and other offshoots of the tanning industry. Just across there you can see the south edge of the Bell Park dump as well. So any city like Kingston that has an industrial past would have these legacy issues. Groundwater engineering and contaminant engineering is involved in trying to clean these up in the best possible way and promote redevelopment. And now regulations prevent us from making these mistakes that we made in the past.